Hey everybody, welcome back. So we had a pretty good weekend in the shop so far. We're about halfway through the next 11-13 episode. Show you a little bit of the stuff. We got some assembly done on the track frames. Got the idlers up here ready to bust into those, but that's not why we're here. So this episode is just going to be like a viewer response edition. I've been getting the same question coming up over and over and over again lately from a lot of different people, and the answer is kind of involved. So instead of typing out several paragraphs under each one of those questions, I thought it was just going to be quicker, easier, and more beneficial to everyone if I just turned it into, well, this episode we have going right now. So it all centers around this undercarriage wear gauge tool that you've seen in some of my D2 videos, and people are asking, where can I find one of these? Unfortunately, I don't know. This is a reproduction. Usually they're made out of aluminum, and this is kind of like, I don't know if it's a press board or a very thin plywood, but a gentleman was doing a reproduction run of these a long time ago. I was at the tail end of high school and spending my car wash money on this when I bought it. It's been that long ago. And yeah, it's not ideal. So it is a copy, but it's still accurate. Being that it's not metal, I wouldn't want to put it in my back pocket and sit on it. It'd probably be the end of it. But very handy tool to have because it has all of the profiles of the various undercarriage components when they were at 100% new spec. You know, you can measure sprocket, you can measure grouser, track roller, idler, link height. It's all on here. Really handy tool to have, and they made them for the D2s, D4s, 6s, 7s, 8s. They made them for everything. The problem is they're not easy to find. And, you know, I've had a lot of people ask me, is there anyone reproducing them? Nobody that I know of now. So another question I get a lot is people really have an interest in them for D4s. There's a lot of D4s out there, and they'd like to have a gauge where they can check undercarriage on a machine they're looking at buying or something they already have and get a pretty good idea exactly where they're at. I've also had some guys looking for some for D6s. Now, that's where the waters get a little bit muddy because like my D2 gauge fits every D2 ever made from 3J number 1, the first D2 they ever put together, to the very last U series. It fits all those crawler tractors because Cat never changed the undercarriage dimensions on any of them. The D2 is an anomaly in that respect. It really never had a lot of innovation that had to be put into the undercarriage because it pretty well suited the niche that it was designed for. They never had to upgrade that part. All the other models, 4s, 6s, 7s, 8s, all had a lot of innovation going on in the undercarriage department as they were making the machines more and more capable. The undercarriages generally got beefier and beefier. They made everything heavier duty to cope with the demands that were being put on the machines as the years went on. So when we start talking about these undercarriage wear gauges, we run into a problem where there were different generations of undercarriage that were made available for these machines, and it was designed in a way that a lot of times the second, third generation, whatever undercarriage that came out, could also be retrofitted back onto the earlier tractors. So as the lighter duty undercarriages that they originally came equipped with wore out, they would be replaced with whatever the current tier was on the market. So because you can find a D4 gauge doesn't mean it's going to fit whatever generation of undercarriage is on your D4 or your D6, 7, 8, so on and so forth. You know, it's really tough in that regard. And that's why, even though from time to time those gauges do become available, which usually when they do, they never stay for sale for long because so many people are still looking for them. But it's pretty tough to do a reproduction batch run on anything other than a D2 gauge because it's not going to fit everything that's out there. You could have confusion. Someone could buy a D4 gauge and it doesn't match their links or their grousers or, you know, the sprockets because the track pitch is all different. You know, it's really complicated, and I don't have the information available to know. Like, you know, a lot of times to figure out what level of undercarriage you have, you go by like the part number on the track link, and then you can cross-reference that to a specification sheet, get a pretty good idea of what everything has to be. But as far as being able to tell which gauge matches which style of undercarriage, I'm not the guy to ask because I just don't have it. So what you'll have to do, you know, in the meantime, when you're looking at buying a machine, because several guys in the comment section have said, I got a buddy looking at buying some D6s, but we really want to be able to assess it first. You just kind of have to go by eye. You know, you want to look at, like, make sure the flanges on your track rollers aren't beating on the pin bosses on the links. That would indicate, you know, like your link height is getting wore down or your rollers are getting wore down. See if they've got big gouges wore in them or not. Another thing to look at is idlers. You know, you can get a pretty good idea about like pin and bushing where, depending on how far the idler is pushed out on the end of the track frame. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind, if pin and bushing wear gets excessive and the idler gets stretched way out, kind of a get you by fix is just to take a track link out. And what that does, it just reduces the length of the track, and you can, run your idler back again, and you kind of have a second life. But you're living on borrowed time, because if the track pitch is allowed to run too far out of spec, it's going to wear the bushings in the track chain, which is what this socket's going to replicate, and it's going to really wear the sprocket teeth. So one way to check your pitch, just another kind of way to confirm visually, is look at the bushing that the next sprocket tooth is about to pick up. If it's pretty well aligned with that gullet already and it's going to just guide straight in, that means your pins and bushings are probably pretty well within spec yet. We're not scientific here. It just gives you, just one more thing to look at. But if it looks like that next bushing is riding out ahead of that gullet where it's going to kind of hit the tip of that tooth and then have to be pulled in, that means that, well, you've probably got some really excessive pin and bushing wear going on in that track chain. And if your idler's also cranked way back, but you're not guiding in between your sprocket teeth well, it's a pretty good bet someone's taken a link or two out of that track. So yeah, when you start running that far out of pitch, it just grinds teeth off. It wears holes in bushings. Really bad scenario. And of course, the final thing, grouser bar height, you can tell at a glance. If they're getting really short, they're pretty much run out. Or if they've had new grouser bar welded on, been built up, you also know they've got a lot of hours on them, So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have any really good answers for you guys regarding, track gauges. In addition to being hard to find, well, anything beyond a D2, it's kind of hard to match too, because in theory you could have two D4s parked next to each other of the same series, and they could have two different levels of undercarriage on that, are going to require two different gauges, or the gauges that are available might not fit the one series because the one generation of undercarriage, because they never made one for that one, or it gets confusing. So yeah, not a lot of good news on this episode, but it's kind of an involved answer, and you just kind of have to use your eye and use your best judgment. Once you look at enough of these things, you can start picking out some of these details and have a rough idea of what you're looking at even before you actually start taking real measurements, So it's about the best I can give you guys. Sorry, I wish I had better news, but thanks for watching, y'all. And yeah, next 11, 13 episodes coming soon.